Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Reference Recording. And today we're talking about the Verdi Requiem, one of the most popular and masterful and fabulous choral works out there. It's been recorded a bazillion times, very, very well. On numerous occasions, I made a whole video about the best versions of the Verdi Requiem, and it's really tough to pick your favorite. But this is not about what your favorite is. This is about what the reference recording is. And that means the one that's gotten the most recommendations, the most discussion, the one that critics generally like to say is sort of their triangulation version, the one that they listen to absorb what the possibilities of the work are and then compare other subsequent versions to, things like that. You know, where the buzz is, as they say. And, one of you asked, when I was talking about Beethoven's Eroica and the Zell recording as the reference, well, they said, I haven't heard of it being the Zell. I haven't heard of it being the Zell. Whatever that meant. I haven't heard of it being the reference recording, and I'd like to know what your sources are. I mean, really, my sources are me. That's my source, because for the past 40 years, I've been talking to all of my colleagues in the profession who are critics, and we discuss these things actually very frequently. When new recordings come out, we say, have you heard this? And is it as good as that? And what's your reference? We talk about these things and what I've seen and all of that stuff. So you'll just have to take my word for it. And if that means that this is subjective, well, then you're really stupid to think that this isn't subjective. I have to say that because, of course, it's subjective. It's always subjective. The ultimate choice is subjective. But there is a factual component to the idea of a reference recording. The factual component is simply an assessment of how frequently certain versions are discussed in preference to other versions. When you have a work that's quite popular, and there are numerous really excellent versions out there to talk about. Now, the Verdi Requiem is a case in point, and a very interesting one, actually, because over time it's had multiple reference recordings. I mean, there was always Toscanini. Let's start with that, who was very famous for his performance of the Verdi Requiem. But then around 1960, Fritz Reiner showed up, and this was a big deal for the soloists. The soloists were just marvelous. You have Leontine Price, Rosalind Elias, Jussi Björling, and Giorgio Tozzi. Really kind of an amazing lineup. So that was great, which I'm putting away because if I don't put it away now, I will never remember where it came from, because these are all scrambled still. This was my main collection back here and over there and around. And it's all de-alphabetized, and probably it will never be alphabetized. Fortunately, I know where everything is. I mean, I know what everything is, and it's sort of in loosely alphabetical clumps, so I can find what I need to find. But it's a mess. Don't ever move. I mean, I'm just telling you, find a place, and lock yourself in there permanently. So there was that one. Then, if you recall, there was Schulte and Pavarotti and Sutherland and all those people. And that was a big deal on Decca, because that was designed to supplant Reiner, which it largely did. In the minds of many. And that was the one that got promoted and pushed like crazy. You have to remember something. One of the other factors in deciding what a reference recording is not, the egghead critical people sitting back and just deciding what the best performances are. It's not. It has a lot to do with what label the thing was on and what its availability was and how it was marketed and promoted over time. Because in order for a consensus to emerge, everyone has to be able to listen to the same thing and form an opinion. And so distribution is a big deal. International distribution is a big deal. And the power of the major labels back in those days was a big deal. And so most of these reference recordings will be on major labels. It's hard to find reference recordings on independent labels because they didn't have until the past couple of decades, they didn't have the distribution, or they didn't exist at all. So keep that in mind. There's a commercial aspect to this too. Now, I know some of you have this sort of allergy to anything that's commercial, and I would say get over it. Not everything that's commercial is bad. Not everything that's marketed is bad. And it's the acme of hypocrisy to castigate the major labels for not marketing and promoting their music, and then turning up your nose sniffily and dissing the things that they do promote when they do get behind something and they do promote it and they do keep it available and they do distribute it. And then you say, oh, that's just crass commercialism. And it's, sometimes it gets a little bit silly, frankly. I mean, all of the hypocritical nonsense. And I'm particularly not sympathetic to this sort of, left-wing anti-capitalist concept that leaks into one's appreciation of music. We should only be talking about how good the music is. And we should be talking about, how available it is and how many people have the opportunity to listen to it. And whatever encourages or promotes or supports that concept, the dissemination, distribution, sale, and listening of music, I'm in favor of, whether it's capitalist or something else. Let's be straight about that, shall we? And we're not going to have a discussion about it. If you so much as mention it, you're getting deleted immediately. I'm telling you now. That's just the way it is. Anyway, so there was the Schulte and there was the Reiner, and Decca was doing really, really well with the Verdi Requiems. However, the reference recording was none of those. It was this one. It was Carlo Maria Giulini from, 1964? 63, actually, I think is when it was recorded, with the Philharmonia Orchestra and Chorus, and Wow Baby, and an amazing lineup of soloists. You have Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, who's not as great as Leontine Price, but I mean, she's very good in this. Krista Ludwig, Nikolai Gedda, and Nikolai Ghiaurov. It was one of those Walter Legg jobs. And with, Mrs. Legg, who was, what's her name? Schwarzkopf. Yes, Betty Blackhead, as we used to call her. So, yeah, I mean, this was the one. And it has been ever since. I mean, despite billions of other really fine Verdi Requiems, people come back to this one. Why do they come back to this one? Well, this was kind of astonishing. What was astonishing about it was that, Giulini was always known for his nobility, his spirituality, his gracefulness, his general representation of all the finer things in musical life, that kind of stuff. I mean, a conductor of great seriousness who could be just a touch on the dull side. Well, he was on fire here. Holy mackerel. I mean, the Dies Irae is just a smoker. My God, it's like, whoa, it'll peel the paint off the back of the room. It was astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. And it was in no way matched by his remake, as some of you have pointed out, for Deutsche Grammophon. Some of you scream and yell about how bad that was. It's not bad. It's actually pretty good, frankly. But it's so much more staid than this recording, so much less eruptive. I mean, this is a performance that balances drama and spirituality in equal measure. It's not my favorite. I'm just telling you what people say about it. And I agree with them. When I go for Verdi Requiems, I always thought that Riccardo Muti was even more excited. I think Robert Shaw was amazing on Telarc. He learned it from Toscanini. The new Papano is astonishing, possibly a new reference recording. I mean, there are really a lot of good ones. Schulte did a great remake for RCA with Janet Baker, actually, of all people. So there are fine Verdi Requiems out there. But this was the reference. It was the reference. If I could venture why it's not my personal private choice, I'm not a big fan of Elizabeth Schwarzkopf. That's my personal taste. I also think, that the sonics are a little bit challenged. When this came out on CD, there was some very, very obvious tape saturation. Now, in some respects, that's more exciting because it happens at these big, loud climaxes, like at the Dies Irae, when it's like, oh my God. And you hear sort of a little staticky stuff in the higher frequencies. Also, the balances are not ideal here. Again, at the beginning of the Dies Irae, where the trombones are so loud, the brass is so ferocious, you don't hear the entry of the choir. Now, these are tiny, tiny things. Very, very small, little nitpicky things that I just point out. Again, I point out about this. These are not opinions. These are objective facts They are loud. You don't hear this. There is saturation. I mean, these are not opinions. The weight that you give to those and whether or not that knocks this thing off of its reference recording pedestal is up to you personally. But for me, it's still the reference recording. I mean, it is. First of all, it's an astonishingly great recording of the Verdi Requiem, a fabulous, inspired performance. There is, by the way, a BBC Classics live version of this from the same time that's just as exciting and that has better balances. The action, it's in stereo. The sound is not as rich as this, but it is a better sort of view of what I think the thing probably sounded like when Giulini conducted it. So that's out there too, and I reviewed that on classicstoday.com. But I just need to point out that whether I like it or don't like it, or it's my favorite or not my favorite, is irrelevant. It is the reference recording. And it was wonderful to see the English critics get their knickers in a twist over it because there was this and then there was Schulte. And, Schulte was at Covent Garden and they had to be nice to Schulte. They really did. But this, of course, was the English performance that was done with English forces. So it still retained its measure of preference over all subsequent comers. So that was really kind of fun to read about too. I mean, there's a history of these things, a history of criticism in print and in magazines and elsewhere. But really, when you get right down to it, this is as fine a Verdi Requiem as ever existed. And it makes a wonderful version to use as a way to compare other versions, because you hear, I mean, just such gorgeousness in the other sections, not the loud sections, the opening Kyrie and the Libera Me and the wonderful choral singing, which is really first class. And I mean, the joyfulness of the Sanctus and the Lux Aeterna, which is just like, luminous. Let's lux, get it? Light, luminous. I mean, it has so many qualities and so few deficits, and it's so useful to have a performance that's this inspired when you hear other versions, which may be quite different. Another commentator said, well, if like Bernstein's Mahler Third is the reference, why isn't everyone copying Bernstein's Mahler Third? And the answer is because A, there's more to the music than any one person can possibly present, number one, if it's a great work, and number two, because those people are not Leonard Bernstein, so they feel the music differently. And, it's good to hear different versions and different types of interpretations, but it's also good to have a model, to have a point of comparison and a way to get to know the music, which as a way to get to know the music, you're not going to do better than this. Really, you're not. So there you have it, my friends, the reference recording of the Verdi Requiem with Carlo Maria Giulini, the Philharmonia Orchestra and Chorus, and a slam-bang quartet of soloists. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.